started the Earth Organization, it really didn't start with the Earth Organization at all. What happened was I have always had a lot of conservation and environmental activities. And I decided, following being in Baghdad, that I needed to create a bigger effect in the area and a lot more needed to be done. So I just collected all my activities, put them under one umbrella and gave it a name. And then from that point, people started joining, it started expanding, and it's just grown very rapidly all over the world. Well, Europe and France are first world countries. Very, very important that the areas where we have the highest literacy and the highest understanding and the highest number of people attending schools and good schools understand the new concepts that we're bringing forward in order to make a difference for the planet. We have to look at this, despite there being thousands of groups out there, and every government has an environmental department. The problem we're facing is that the statistics on the planet continue to go down from an animal and life perspective, from an environmental perspective. New ideas are needed, and these new ideas must germinate in Europe, in France as a leading country in Europe, and in countries like the United States. It must be handled first in order to deal with the excess CO2 emissions is public awareness. We need the public to know what's going on. Children must understand the phenomena. They must know that CO2 is trapping the heat and creating a greenhouse effect. So the most important thing is education. And this is actually starting to really take place now, especially with Al Gore's movie, which has done a tremendous amount of good, and the recent decisions, scientific decisions, which have been publicized, which show how important this is, and the fact is it must now take place, that people must start responding. The important, I think, the back of the problem has now been broken. Governments all over the place, the scientific associations, academics everywhere are talking about the problem. And we have an ability to deal with it because governments will now start legislating. It becomes immoral now to continue with the CO2, putting out so much CO2 from the factories, etc., and from motor cars. So mankind is starting to come to grips with it and is dealing with this problem now. There is another side to this, though, and that there are a lot of prominent scientists who are still saying that this whole thing is cyclical, that it's not it's not man-made. We have to keep our minds open to this. We can't just close it. At the moment, it seems to me that it's a little bit like the migration of the million wildebeest through the Masai Mara. Everyone's just going down the road. Mankind's created all these problems. There are a lot of very well-respected scholars who do not believe it's the case. The Earth Organization's point of view is we shouldn't be putting all this muck into the atmosphere anyway. The emissions need to be, the carbon-based emissions need to stop. We need to control it, we need to get on top of it. As mankind, we need to get on top of it. But we have to keep an open mind. We need to look at the fact that it may be cyclical as well, and there's no good crashing economies in order to fight a problem that was cyclical in the first place. So it just requires a little bit of common sense as we go stampeding down this road. Probably the most important crisis facing mankind at this point in time is not CO2 emissions, but species depletion. We're facing an extinction of species across this planet at this point in time, which is quite unprecedented. Scientists are calling it a great extinction of species, equivalent and more severe to that which took place in previous ice ages and at the time when the dinosaurs were wiped out. This is a phenomenon that's not so well known. We now have governments and scientific associations, universities, and everybody getting on board with the global warming issue. And they will legislate, and people will change and make a difference. But how do you legislate that you need to take care of the insect kingdom, for instance, or the animal kingdom? The laws are very loose. And what's important here is that life survives through biodiversity. It cannot survive alone. It has to have this incredible biodiversity, and we are pulling that web to pieces at the moment. Mankind is breaking the fragile chains that link all survival on Earth. And this is the next crisis that needs to be confronted now. In fact, there are a lot of academics and scientists are saying this is the real problem. It's more of a problem than global warming, and it's the real problem we're facing at this time. So This is an area that the Earth Organization is going to severely focus on. Life is a joint effort. None survive alone. Despite our civilized state today, despite the fact that we have access to technology and scientific discoveries unheard of in the past, there's a fundamental error that remains almost in the psyches of human beings, even in first world countries. And that is a misunderstanding of the role of the plant and animal kingdoms. I was asked a question recently, which is more important, a man or an animal? And that question is just a question that can't be answered and leads one down a wrong path, because the answer is that we live in association, and because of our dependency, our interdependency with the plant and animal kingdoms. And that understanding has to be brought to the fore. It's not a case of man is more important than animals. We need to have a planet to survive on. The plant and animal kingdoms are part of glorious life itself surviving, of which we are part of and which we are independent with. We survive as families, we survive as groups, we survive with and for the plant and animal kingdoms, we survive in a life-giving environment. All of these things are important. One can't say we are superior to animals. I think it's a hangover from the days when there were just a few humans who were struggling to survive in a hostile environment, perhaps dominated by wildlife. It's not the case anymore. The wildlife kingdom has been completely overwhelmed by technology and uncaring man. And we must know that our fate on this planet is very, very closely linked to the fate of the plant and animal kingdoms. This is something people have to learn again or relearn.